So yeah, the author says here, انظر إلى قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله. This is a famous hadith. It starts in Bukhari. It's also mentioned at the beginning where a person was traveling from Makkah Mukarrama to Medina Munawwara, because a lot of the Muslims were moving that time and they're doing the hijrah, the migration. But at that same time, there was one woman moving from Makkah to Medina, and this Muslim person wanted to marry her. So she said, oh, let's move to Medina Munawwara and then we can get married there. So at that moment when he was traveling, his mind was focused on the marriage part. Although everybody was moving because of religion, because they wanted to have a better place to live their religious life. But this guy was focused on going to Medina Munawwara to get married. Now the tricky question is marriage a religious thing or a non-religious thing? It's religious. It's religious, but it's not the highest level. That's the whole trick here. So he says at the end, تَأَمَّلْ هَذَا الْأَمْرَ إِن كُنْتَ ذَا فَهْمٍ. Think about it a lot if you're a person of understanding. He says it is religious, but is it the highest level? Is he moving for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or something that's kind of religious, which is marriage? So that's why the hadith goes on, وَمَنْ كَانَتْ حِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى دُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ إِمْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا. If a person is doing his hijrah, he's moving, but for some worldly reasons, or for a woman that he wants to marry, then hijratuhu ila mahajar. Then in that case, he's traveling and he's moving for whatever reason he's moving, meaning either for dunya or for woman. So those two are not the highest levels, because if somebody moved only because of religion, that would be the highest level. So as believers, as Muslims, we do a lot of things that are religious. We go to work, we go to school, we have good intentions. We're looking for halal means to fulfill our needs. So all that is religious, but is it the highest level of religiousness where we're doing it solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is it slightly less than that, we're doing it for kind of selfish reasons? So this gets really deep, because if you think about it, are we earning halal money to enjoy it for ourselves in a halal way? Or are we only going to work because it's a religious obligation as a Muslim to go to work? The outcome is going to be the same. You're going to go, you're going to get money, you're going to spend it on yourself. And the intention, they're both religious intentions. The trick is, what is your A and your B? So it's really tricky. The more higher a person is, the more higher level intentions he can make. For example, we're sitting here in this dars. So we're sitting here, is it because we're doing the dars because we want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is the intention, I only came to the dars to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then this can serve other people after? So it's, the more quickly the intention is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more directly, the more higher the reward. We give food to poor people, for example. So is it, I want to make him happy, so when he's happy, inshallah, Allah will be happy. So you see how we took a while to talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other one is, no, I only give food to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see that, how deep it is. So this is where he's saying, think about all these things. And he actually focuses, what goes with تَأَمَّلْ هَذَا الْأَمْرَ إِن كُنْتَ ذَا فَهْمٍ. Think about these things if you're so smart.
That's very important, because like as human, we're very selfish.
Yeah, that's what it is.
A lot of time, if you want to do something, because of the human selfishness that Allah has given to us, maybe we don't find that selfishness in some other stuff, and so we're leaving.
Yeah.
And the intention is just Allah, then we will be like, no, so it's okay. It's not, whatever. If it's not my selfishness, I'm just doing for Allah. Like two peoples are fighting, they have physical fighting, you're stepping in just for, to please Allah and to help them.
Yeah.
So you're not like moving from that place. But when there's like a selfishness that, well, if I help them, they won't like, break their faces and this and that. If that's the intention, you may fear that, well, no, maybe they will harm me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the more deeper you think about it, that's how deep it can be. So and the other thing you mentioned was selfishness. We have a lot of selfishness. A lot of our things, they come down back to us and my benefits, my pleasure, my needs. Very rarely does a person think about other people. That's why many times in relationships, a person will be talking very religious. For example, a woman, she's asking for her rights, and she'll be quoting a hadith. But at the foundation of it is, serve me. And the man will be saying the opposite completely. He'll be also throwing hadiths.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he wants to be served according to his ego. So at the end of the day, they're both throwing religion at each other, but the foundation of their argument is self-fulfillment. So that's why it becomes really problematic when you get into those kind of situations, because they're both talking religion, but when you think carefully about it, they're both coming out of a very selfish intent. So it's very hard to tell them, I know you're mentioning hadiths, but are you listening to yourself? You sound kind of selfish. It's so hard to say that because they're saying, oh, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said this.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to tell them, I know what the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said. Are you listening to yourself? You don't sound so prophetic. You sound a little selfish the way you're speaking. So it's a very big thing. And obviously these are very deep things that takes lifetimes to focus on. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us a lot of insight into these things. And we'll read a little bit from this book. So last week we spoke about the shafa'at of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Shafa'at, the intercession, is where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam will try to help and ask Allah for betterment for people. So in Fazail A'mal, for example, they mention 7 levels of shafa'at. Either Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam helping everybody by speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to start the Day of Judgment. Other times he might come to a Jannati person who might be getting a lesser Jannat. He'll ask Allah to give him a higher Jannat. Or a person who is going to Jahannam, but then Nabi asks for a lesser punishment. And a believer who has too many sins, and Nabi asking for his sins to be forgiven. So these are all different types of shafa'ats. So there's 7 levels of shafa'at, I think, or 6 levels. So the one that we spoke about last week is the one where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would ask for the Day of Judgment to start. So that'll be a intercession, a shafa'at for everyone. Even for non-Muslims, it will kind of help them because they'll be tired of waiting. Yeah, and then the next part is talking about the speaking of body parts on that day is also reality. So we believe in this. In Surah Yasin, I think it mentions, اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. Today we will seal their mouths and their hands and their feet. Their hands will speak and their feet will give witnesses to what they used to do. And someone asked, like, how is that possible? So the answer was, well, the one who can make the mouth speak can also make other body parts speak. Paradise and hell. So that's the next topic. Paradise and hell are realities, and both currently exist. Meaning they're not ideas for the future that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create them in the future. They already exist. Jahannam and Jannah, they already exist. Neither of the two nor their inhabitants will ever become extinct. So there was an idea that is Jahannam going to be forever? Is Jannah going to be forever? So after a detailed study, you realize, yeah, Khalidina, Quran mentions many times Khalidina or Abada. So which both the words give the impression that Jahannam and Jannat are eternal. May Allah make it easy for us to enter Jannah and say what's from Jahannam. We affirm that Allah Most High created both paradise and hell before creation, and then created inhabitants for each one. So Jannah and Jahannam were created first, and the people that will end up in it are created after. The people of paradise enter it by His grace and generosity. So this is a very deep sentence. Does a person become Jannati or Jannat worthy because of his own amazingness and his good qualities, or is it because Allah's special grace on him? Like Allah blessed him to become a very good person. So he makes it clear that people go to Jannah because of Allah's grace. And that's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he mentioned something of this nature, and the Sahaba said, what about you? Are you going to go to Jannah because of Allah's grace and rahmat, or are you going to Jannah because of your own deeds? He said, no, even me, I go to Jannah only because of Allah's mercy, not because of my actions. So it's a very deep sentence. We affirm that He will endow them with the beatific vision of His essence. So this is speaking about one of the biggest blessings in Jannah, is being able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exalted and most high without modality, indulging in the method of how this will happen, or corporealism, suggesting any resemblance between Him and the creation. The people of the fire enter it by His justice. So here he's implying that people do not go to Jahannam because Allah destined them to go to hell, as in Allah pressured them, Allah forced them, and they had nothing to do with it. So the answer, so he's saying no, they'll go to Jahannam because of their own doings, and that will be justice that they go to hell. Some believers will enter it also temporarily for certain sins, after which they are taken out, since no believer will remain in the fire eternally. So even if a Muslim ends up in Jahannam because of his sins, then he will be taken out after he's been cleaned of the sin. Because once a person is a believer, he cannot be in Jahannam forever. He can only be in Jahannam temporarily. When a believer enters Jahannam, he enters it for tazkiyah, for purification.
From sin.
Yes, very good. And a disbeliever, he enters Jahannam because of a punishment, because he's a disbeliever is kafir, he has kufr in his heart. He's entering it because of the evil of his actions, and because kufr cannot be cleaned by the fire, so he'll be in the fire forever, and it's a adhab for him. So for a kafir who'll go to Jahannam, he'll be there forever. So it's not a tazkiyah for him. And for a believer who ends up sinning, because he's a believer, he's only going there not because of his aqidah, because of his a'mal. So the Jahannam is like a mercy. Jahannam is like a mercy in some ways, because it still is purifying him. It's not punishing him. And that's why in Surah Rahman, the whole surah is about mercy of Allah. So he's talking about Jannah, the fruits, the rivers, and then suddenly he speaks about Jahannam. But the whole surah is supposed to be a merciful surah. So the Mufassirin mentioned, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about Jahannam, that is a mercy. It's extreme mercy. He's telling us about Jahannam because He wants to protect us. Just like how when we have young kids around us, we say, oh, be careful when you go to the edge of the cliff goes down, you could fall off, so be careful. Or there might be a hole, there might be a snake coming from there, so be careful, don't put your hand in that hole there. So we're telling the kids all these scary things, but is it a punishment? No, it's love, it's mercy. So same thing when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the different punishments of Jahannam, what is the intent? The intent is mercy. Because Allah wants to protect us, so He tells us the dangers of Jahannam. That's how Jahannam can fit into Surah Rahman. So may Allah give us, yes?
Just like the example.
Yeah. So may Allah give us tawfiq to understand our beautiful deen, and may Allah save us from Jahannam. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على النبي الأمي. You can turn it off, please.
The same bright button.
Yes.